Hello and welcome to the Teeing Off podcast. I'm RJ McCullough. This is the first audio version of the podcast, obviously, but I've been doing some videos on YouTube. But hey, it's 2017. Figure it's time to adapt and get a podcast going. So enough about me. I'll get right into the Wells Fargo, which wrapped up. So I'll give a little quick recap of that. Brian Harman emerged victorious. Down the stretch, it didn't look like he was going to be the one that would emerge because Dustin Johnson was right there. He ended up in the clubhouse at 9 under with Pat Perez. It looked like they were going to be going to a playoff and maybe Harman would squeak into it. John Rahm was right behind them, tied with Brian Harman at 8 under. That is where he would eventually finish. But Harman birdieing his last two holes, including a pretty bad chip, to be honest, on the last hole, but a really nice 30-footer to get the win. DJ ends his winning streak at 3, close to making it 4, but considering it was his first tournament back, he made the cut on the number at +1 and then shot back-to-back 67s on the weekend. So he is rounding into good form going into the Players' Championship this weekend. On the Champions Tour, John Daly got back into the winner's circle for the first time in a long time, since 2004. His first Champions Tour event in his 22nd start. A lot of people thought he was going to dominate the Champions Tour. He actually alluded to that earlier in his career himself, but so far he hasn't been doing so well. Got his first win, so good for him. He bogeyed his last 3 holes. I don't want to say he choked because he obviously still got the win. It was a tough finish for John, but hey, he got the win. And in the most typical John Daly celebration imaginable, he was given a beer shower on the final green. Over to the European Tour, they held their first Golf Sixes event this past weekend. Essentially, the event was 2-man teams from 16 countries competing on a specially designed 6-hole course over 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. The team from Denmark defeated Australia in the final, but it wasn't really about who won. It was really just about the format and a different creative thing the European Tour is trying out. They've been doing creative things all year. Some of the popular quirks of the event included, well, the fact that the matches took only around an hour and a half, which is always nice. The crowds were surrounding every single hole, so there's huge crowds, really good atmosphere. The players had walk-up music on the first hole. There was pyrotechnics. There was a shot clock on one of the holes with the fans counting down to put more pressure on the players, make them speed up. So all in all, it was a really good event. Not necessarily my thing. If you've listened to anything I've said previously, I'm not really a big fan of the kind of strange events, especially on the PGA Tour, but this one did actually go over pretty well. The players loved it, the fans loved it, the ratings were really good, so we'll see where this goes. They're going to have it back again next year. They said they're going to do some improvements. All in all, it was a good start for Golf Sixes. Moving on, Grayson Murray, a guy that I've talked about quite a bit, was once again causing headlines, this time for something he actually did on the course, and of course it seeped into Twitter. At first it started out as good news. Grayson was 2 shots off the lead after 36 holes, and being a North Carolina native, he was playing at home. It was making for a really good story. Then he fired a third round 76 to fall out of contention, and after an altercation on the 9th hole with his caddy, Grayson fired his caddy mid-round, chose one of his friends from the crowd to carry his bag for the rest of the round, and ended up firing another 76 and finishing 63rd. Mike Hicks was the guy in his bag. He was the caddy most famously for Payne Stewart when he won the US Open back in 1999. He has been around Grayson for a long time, including his first pro win, which was on the Web.com tour last season. Grayson explained what happened at the Players' Championship on Tuesday. Basically, an altercation sums it up. They had some disagreements over club choice, typical player caddy stuff. Grayson said he was leaning towards getting rid of him already. Just not a good look for Grayson at all. Halfway through his rookie season, he's already stirred the pot, calling tour pros out for being boring on social media, something he could maybe use a little more of. He's had a Twitter beef with other pros over World Golf ranking points. He has requested a model, Lindsay Pellis, to be his caddy for the Masters, which he didn't even qualify for. I can't really blame him for that. Shooter's going to shoot. But all this stuff, just not a good look for Grayson. And then he spent Monday going back and forth on Twitter about his reputation with fans and writers. He followed that up, releasing a statement, and then made his comments on Tuesday at the Players' Championship, and subsequently suspended his Twitter. So hopefully this will be the last Grayson Murray story for a little while. But keep in mind, he's only 23. I guess we can cut him some slack as well. He's still a young guy. Another person that has made some not so many friends on the tour, or fans, I guess you could say, is Ian Poulter. Poulter, fresh off luckily earning his tour card. He really should just be happy, stay quiet, stick to the tour, try and earn full status for next year. Instead, he tried to get, I don't know really actually what he was going for. I guess he was trying to connect with the fans, sending out a tweet with a box of his Titleist practice balls marked with his IP logo on them. Anyways, he sends out a tweet asking fans, how do you mark your practice balls? Now, if this was anyone else, probably would just go off, maybe a little bit of a murmur, but probably wouldn't be a big deal. With all of this cheeky stuff that Poulter's done over the years, obviously this one didn't go over well. 3 things that stuck out to me. Hardly anyone can afford to golf with Titleists, unlimited Titleist as it is, never mind practice Titleist. Most people don't use practice balls. We can barely afford to have enough golf balls for a normal round, never mind having specific balls to use on the range. That's absolutely ridiculous. Third, he marks his practice balls, and if you've seen a picture, if not, Google it. It's a like the IP logo that he has on there. It takes up, I'm going to say, half the ball. It's massive. So it's probably the most ugly marked ball I've ever seen. So if you're going to mark your ball and it's a Titleist, that's certainly not the way to do it. So obviously not a big deal, but Ian Poulter, someone should maybe sit down with him, or maybe he should allow someone to sit down with him, give him a little talk about social media and how to connect with fans, because he just continually comes off as a rich snob that's never had to suffer for anything or know what it's like not to have everything handed to him for his whole life. Anyways, enough about Ian Poulter. To the Players' Championship, the unofficial 5th major, the best non-major hands down, with 48 of the top 50 in the world and a $1.89 million winner's check. It's obviously not hard to see why this is a top 5 event on tour. There are plenty of storylines. So let's start with Jason Day, the defending champ, looking to rebound after a tough start to his year. He's back. Dustin Johnson, fresh off the best weekend by far at Wells Fargo of anyone in the field, feeling healthy, trying to make up for missing the Masters. This would go a little bit of the way. Rory McIlroy and Jordan Spieth hoping to bounce back here from a tough Masters finish as well. Another storyline that's getting a lot of talk that you can hear a lot about over the TV coverage this weekend is the course changes made to Sawgrass right after the event finished last year. They started working on the course, making a bunch of changes. The course is obviously known worldwide for the infamous 17th hole, but the changes elsewhere to spice things up are what you're going to hear about. The biggest change in terms of work, I guess, that had to be done is they changed the grass type on the greens and resurfaced the greens. They changed the 12th hole to a short drivable par 4. So that's always exciting. They rebuilt all the bunkers. They moved a bunch of tees around. They added a lake between the 6th and 7th holes. A bunch of little things geared towards the fans and spectators. They vastly improved the size of the practice area for the players. Aside from that, the tournament always comes down to the last 3 holes. The 16th, a reachable par 5, which can get there with a good drive. The 17th is the short risky par 3. Obviously, everybody knows it's probably the most famous, if not the most famous, top 3, top 5 most famous holes in golf. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't know what that hole was. And the 18th, really, really tough par 4 with water up the left. Always one of the top 10 hardest holes on the tour. Regardless, it's always going to boil down to that. The winning score is usually between 10 and 15 under, which bodes well for fans. There's lots of birdies, but they're not shooting the lights out. In terms of the pairings, DJ, Rory, and JT are paired together, so that is definitely the best pairing. I'm sure they'll be getting lots of TV time. I am a massive golf nerd, so I do research every week on the field, go through the field, sift through it, pick out the top 5 stats categories I think are going to be important, relevant to that course. So this week it was birdie or better percentage, strokes gains on the approach, strokes gained putting, strokes gained tee to green, and scrambling. So out of all of those, obviously mixed in with average finishes as of late, history at the players. For all that, I whittled it down to about 30 guys that I think have a chance to win. I won't bore you with going all through all 30 of them. Long story short, I mean, DJ is obviously coming in, winning 3 of his last 4 events and a second in the one he didn't play. So it's hard to overrate him. But by my numbers, my favorite is actually Ricky Fowler. He won the event a couple years ago. He is the 9th ranked golfer in the world, 8th in FedEx Cup standings. His last 6 starts, removing the Zurich, so last 6 solo events, are all top 16s, 3 of them top 5s. He won the Honda Classic earlier this year and was in contention at the Masters, having a chance to win on the last day, kind of faltering, but nonetheless was in it at the last really big event. He's a previous Players' Championship winner, as I mentioned, and he also has a runner-up in this event. In terms of rankings on tour, birdie or better, he's 7th. Strokes gained approach, 4th. So all those 7th, 4th, 6th, 4th, 2nd. His average for those 5 stats, which, as I mentioned, I deemed most important this week, his average is 4.6, by far the best in the field. Dustin Johnson's is second best, 11.6. A couple sleepers down the list that had surprisingly good numbers. Patrick Cantlay and Adam Hadwin might be bound for big weeks. I don't like Jordan too much this week. Of course, you never know. He could make me sound stupid and win, but he isn't in the best form of everyone. Of the big guns, and John Rahm coming off another good finish last week. He is one of those guys that's always in contention, or seems to be always in contention. Dustin Johnson, as I mentioned, getting himself into that. When he's in an event, he may not win, but he's getting to the point where even if he doesn't play well, he's going to at least be in contention. So always a safe pick to go with Dustin Johnson. But my pick for the 2017 Players' Championship is Ricky Fowler. Okay, that is it. A short one for the first Teeing Off podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm RJ McCullough. Follow me at RJ McCullough on Twitter. Tweet me your thoughts on the first episode of Teeing Off.